The world's most dangerous ship set sail in 1628, and it wasn't seen again for over 300 years. When King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden ordered the building of a new navy ship, its designers ensured it would be the most deadly in the world. Equipped with specially built bronze cannons, the vessel's shot would be almost as fast as sound. As a result, it would be a demonstration of the country's military might. The ship would become known as the Vasa, and on the day of its launch in 1628 crowds of people turned out in Stockholm to see it. Presumably, they hoped to catch a glimpse of their country's prize military machine. However, in a tragic turn of events, spectators would witness a lot more than they'd bargained for. Minutes into its maiden voyage, though, the Vasa disappeared without a trace. Consequently, a stunned crowd looked on in horror as what had been intended as the most powerful ship on the planet succumbed to the most shocking of circumstance. But little did onlookers know that the ship would remain on the seabed for more than 300 years. The 1600s marked a period of great change for Sweden. It was during this time that the country transformed from a poor and sparsely populated nation into a military force. That's because during the years 1611 to 1718, known as Sweden's Age of Greatness, the small northern European state would seize control of the Baltic Sea by gaining land all around it. The first part of this golden era of Swedish history involved King Gustavus Adolphus, sometimes referred to as Gustav Adolf II. Part of the so-called Vasa dynasty, his family line goes back to his grandfather, Gustav Adolf II would go on to become one of Sweden's most successful monarchs. But the situation he inherited was a difficult one. When Gustav Adolf came to power in 1611, Sweden was involved in 3 wars, fighting with Denmark, Russia, and Poland. And war would go on to become a defining factor of the king's reign. Indeed, during his 21-year rule, Sweden engaged in hostilities in all but 3 of them. One of Gustav Adolf's primary concerns, it seems, was maintaining the balance of Protestant power in Northern Europe. With that in mind, Gustav Adolf was keeping a close eye on the 30 Years' War which was raging in the region now known as Germany. From the point of view of the Protestants, though, the war was not looking positive. As a result, Sweden's long-running battle with Catholic Poland became even more crucial. And if the king was to seize control of the Baltic region, he would require a mighty navy. Unfortunately, though, the Swedish navy suffered many losses during the 1620s. In 1625, in fact, 10 ships wrecked following a storm off the Riga Bay. Meanwhile, during 1627's Battle of Oliwa, the Swedish navy lost a further 2 vessels. 3 more losses came in 1628 and many more ships wrecked in the following years. Luckily though, the Swedish military had a plan up its sleeve. That's because the force planned to launch one of the most technologically advanced ships the world had ever seen at that point. Its name was Vasa and work began on the sophisticated vessel in 1626 at Stockholm's naval shipyard. Ordered by King Gustav Adolf, it's safe to say that the Vasa was built for war. It came equipped with over 60 bronze cannons capable of firing over 551 pounds of ammunition in a single shot. What's more, once fired, its load traveled so fast, it nearly broke the sound barrier. As such, the vessel would be a formidable force on the Baltic Sea. But it wasn't just the Vasa's armament that was noteworthy. That's because the ruler spared no expense when it came to the decoration of the ship. The vessel was adorned with a series of carved wooden images depicting tales of the Swedish royals, including King Gustav Adolf himself. The Vasa's rich decorations were a symbol of King Gustav Adolf's ambitions for his reign, as well as his country. With that in mind, he was impatient to have it launched. The vessel's maiden voyage was, as a result, scheduled for August 10, 1628, despite some concerns over the ship's stability. In fact, the run-up to Vasa's maiden voyage saw a number of delays. There had been problems with the gun supply and even a switching of captains. When the day of the ship's launch arrived, it was anchored outside Stockholm's Tre Kronor Castle, ready to join the Swedish Navy's reserve squadron on Alvsnabben Island. From there, the Vasa could go on any number of missions. Perhaps it would reinforce a blockade on the Polish city of Gdansk. Or maybe it would travel on to Stralsund port in Germany, which was being protected by a Swedish squadron at the time. However, in reality, the warship would never make it out of Stockholm's waters. The day of the maiden voyage began much like any other Sunday in Sweden. Members of Vasa's crew, like many other Stockholm natives, will have attended church that morning and possibly received communion. But as the day went on, a festive atmosphere filled the city. Crowds even began to gather around the quay in the hopes of catching a glimpse of the famed ship. Some people even took to the water themselves, using small boats to get even closer to the Vasa. But the crew's families had the best seats in the house, as they were also on the vessel, in celebration of its maiden voyage. They were due to leave the ship at nearby Vaxholm fortress, before it continued on to Alvsnabben. With everyone on board, the Vasa was ready to set sail between around 5 o'clock that afternoon. To mark the occasion, patriotic music may even have rung out across the quay. But because of strong winds, the ship's launch ended up being quite a staggered affair. As a result, the Vasa had to be pulled towards the current so that it could be carried down the harbor. With the Vasa finally asail, its crew were at the mercy of the elements and the vessel's prowess on the waves. However, the first almighty gust of wind that filled the ship's sails was almost enough to tip it over. Somehow, it was able to recover. But she would not be as successful the second time around. After another powerful blast, the Vasa heaved to one side. Soon, water was pouring into the ship through its lower deck gun ports. It then became clear that the warship was sinking, much to the alarm of those on board. The captain ordered the crew to close the gun ports and cast off the sails. But it was simply too late to save it. In panic, many of those on board the Vasa jumped into the ocean to flee the sinking ship. However, below deck, people had to struggle their way up now heavily tilted steps. In a matter of minutes, it was all over and the ship was relegated to a watery grave more than 100 feet below sea level. With the Vasa now at the bottom of the sea, some of those who had managed to escape clung to its masts for dear life. Elsewhere, the smaller boats following the sunken ship's ill-fated maiden voyage rescued survivors. There are even some reports of people swimming almost 400 feet to the safety of the shore. Sadly though, 30 of those on board the Vasa didn't survive. For the most part, they had become trapped below deck as it sank. Among them was Hans Jonsson, who was intended as the ship's captain before being replaced by Sofring Hansen, who himself had a lucky escape after abandoning the ship rather too late. He'd already been sucked under the water once.